One of the things that I have always admired about Judaism is that it grounds us in morality. Judaism doesn't just ask us to believe, it asks us to live in a way that matters. It's a religion of action over belief. And in Reform Judaism especially, we've embraced the call to tikkun olam, repairing the world. And that's not just a slogan, it's a daily practice. Working on ourselves, working on our communities, and trying in big and small ways to make the world better. When we think about what drives us to good, we often begin with our emotions, with feelings. We see suffering, we feel compassion. We see injustice, we feel outrage. And those emotions hopefully move us to act. But morality isn't only about feelings. The way that we think about moral choice also shapes us as moral actors. How we imagine what's possible, how we frame responsibility, that too makes us who we are. And so we come to the big question this evening. Do we really have the freedom to choose? Now, on the surface, the answer seems obvious, but it's a little more complex if we go deeper. And there are many perspectives on what it means to choose and make moral choices. So tonight I want to share three of them, one from Torah, one from science, and one from Buddhism, hence the Dalai Lama introduction. Now, they don't all agree. It's exactly like the Talmud. How you learn is by hearing different opinions that don't agree, and through the process, hopefully you gain something. But hopefully each has something to teach us about being better people and creating a better world. In the book of Deuteronomy, there is a very explicit statement about free will. And it happens in this week's Torah portion. I quote, "Briefly, see, I set before you today a blessing and a curse, the blessing if you obey, and the curse if you do not." I realize that may not be to our taste because it's a little bit simple. I mean, did the people who died as victims in the Holocaust deserve what they did because of what they experienced because of their actions? But it still is a simple and powerful statement on moral choice. And essentially it's saying it's up to you. The Torah's perspective on free will is not just empowering, it can be liberating. It doesn't label us as helpless or our lives as predetermined. It's not Calvinism. There's actually a Hasidic rabbi, the Ishbitzer, who's pretty darn Calvinist. But I should say the Gerer Rebbe thought he was a heretic. Instead, it's a little bit of a debate among the Hasidim there. Instead, it tells us that choices matter. We have the power to choose life, to choose blessings over curses. And there's a midrash, and a rabbinic interpretation of Torah that makes this more explicit. Before creating humanity, the angels argued. Yes, there are angels in rabbinic Judaism. We knocked them out of Reform Judaism, but they are there in traditional Judaism. Before creating humanity, the angels argued. Some said, don't do it. Don't create the world. People will lie, they'll cheat, they'll be cruel, they'll be absolutely awful. And other angels said, go ahead and create them. They'll show kindness, they'll show compassion. And in the end, God went ahead and created us anyway. And he did that by the means of us by throwing some truth down. Let's see what humanity does with the chance. And that story suggests that free will isn't only a gift given by God, it's also a risk that God takes on us. God trusts us to use our freedom to bring more kindness into the world. The traditional rabbis were not satisfied to leave it at that, do they ever? They asked God, if God knows everything, if God knows everything, how can we really be free? Rabbi Akiva gave us an answer, which, to be honest, I've also found particularly unsatisfying, like Deuteronomy, but it's the tradition. Everything There's a wisdom there, but it's not ultimately satisfying. And I actually think Rabbi Akiva knew that. He's a really bright guy. Everything is foreseen, yet permission is granted. The idea is God knows how it's going to work out, how the story ends. But we still have choice. It's sort of like we make a choice, but God knows what the choice is that we're going to make us. And through that experience, through that paradox, ethics is possible by Rabbi Akiva's understanding. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev turned it into a prayer. He said, if you already know what I'll do tomorrow, he's saying this to God, how can I change it? And yet you tell me not to sin. So please forgive me for what I could not help. Again, a paradox. And the rabbi's paradox feels real, well, because much of our lives can be shaped by factors that are beyond us. Where we're born, the families we grow up in, the opportunities we're given, yet we also feel, and we very much feel, the weight of our decisions despite these factors being beyond our control. We know when we've chosen kindness, we know when we've chosen cruelty, and we live with that tension every day. I want to turn to science. There's a scholar, he's a neuroscientist at Stanford, Robert Sapolsky. He grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home. And he comes to the conclusion, I'll get to the punchline, that free will doesn't exist. As a child, he wore leg braces. And he asked himself basically the question that I'm sure all of us ask when we're suffering, even though it's a completely unproductive question, we can't help but ask it nonetheless, why me? And the answers he got from his rabbi didn't satisfy him, the answers we just heard. So as a neuroscientist, he started looking at experiments where the brain begins preparing for an action before the person becomes conscious of the action. And he then did research with baboons in Kenya, and he saw that stress, status, and environment also shape their behavior. And he concluded that we're the products of our genes and of circumstance. Now, Sapolsky, one could think that this is a really depressing conclusion, but he doesn't see it as leading to despair. Instead, he thinks that it should motivate us to take responsibility for those circumstances that we find ourselves in. We may not be things may not be entirely in our control, but nonetheless, we must work to reduce suffering and build up systems that help people to flourish. So he may deny free will, but he still says something that sounds a lot like Torah: be merciful, be compassionate. Now finally Buddhism. I've hinted to that quite a bit. Buddhism approaches the question differently. At the heart is an idea called anatta, no self. What we call the self is not a solid thing at all. This is going to be hard to get our heads around. It's just, I should just say it right away, it's just not how we think. Basically, we're not a self, we're not here. And the world around us isn't really here either, it's an illusion. So I'll tell a story that really, it's a Buddhist parable, a Zen parable that exemplifies this. A monk is chased by a tiger. He runs to the edge of a cliff and clings to a vine. Above him, the tiger waits to kill him. Below him, he looks down and another tiger waits to eat him. And then he notices a wild strawberry. He picks it and he eats it and says, "That is the sweetest strawberry that I have ever eaten." So the story really isn't about making a grand choice. It's about awareness. It's about presence. It's about what in our contemporary culture you often hear this word mindfulness. So you meet each moment with clarity. And for Buddhism, the moral task is not choosing in the way of Deuteronomy, but refining ourselves through awareness and directing that refinement and towards compassion, moment by moment. I know it's asking more than we can do, like most religious ethical systems. Moment by moment, be aware, refine ourselves, and try to be compassionate. So all of this has sounded very philosophical so far, so let me share a story from my rabbinate that I hope it brings it down to earth. In my last congregation, a woman lost her husband after a long struggle with ALS. She had cared for him with love and devotion as he declined when he finally passed. Needless to say, she was grieving hard. And at the Shiva, I noticed a man I didn't recognize. I introduced myself and asked how he knew the woman. He said, "I don't know her, but I saw the obituary announcing the death, and when you hear about a Shiva, you just show up." This guy's actually looking at the obituaries and waiting and looking for Jewish people who have died and showing up to the Shiva. And that moment has really stayed with me. He wasn't debating free will. He wasn't being philosophical like I just have been doing. He didn't analyze it. He showed up. We could call it choice. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's instinct. I mean, does it really matter? He showed up and showed compassion in action. And that's what matters. And his presence made her feel less alone. And that's what matters. And so that's where it really comes together. Sapolsky reminds us that compassion is the only sane response that we have to human limits. Buddhism calls us to be present in the moment, and that man at Shiva embodied all of it. He simply showed up. So here there are these three different voices. Torah says you can choose. Science says your choices are illusions. Buddhism says there's no chooser at all, just awareness. So what do we do with that? For me, the answer is just show up. We keep trying. We keep practicing compassion. We may not know whether our choices are completely free, but they do matter. When we choose kindness, it makes a difference to the person who's receiving it. When we act for justice, it ripples out towards the community, and that's enough. Reform Judaism has always emphasized action, as Rabbi Tarfon taught. It's not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. One of my rabbis that I study with always closes a study session with saying, "Let's go out there and do some mitzvahs." Needless to say, that's an Orthodox rabbi. But what he means is let's go out there in our small way. Let's show up. Let's show compassion. Let's try to make the world a better place. And that's really what it gets down to. So whatever we believe about free will, the task of Tikkun Olam remains. So tonight as we welcome Shabbat, maybe be inspired to choose life, whether that means resisting despair or going through the process of despair, knowing that it's leading somewhere. We don't know where, but it's leading somewhere. Embracing compassion or simply reaching out with kindness in small ways. And in those choices, free or not, we live out the best of Judaism. Shabbat Shalom.